You've already seen me list some of the things that can get stirred up in wedding planning, and you've probably felt it already. The list is almost endless because it's basically anything that is either unhealed or anything that is changing because of the wedding. And when you're getting married, your relationship to your other family members is changing to a degree because your family is rearranging, as well as it's rearranging within your partnership. Family trauma can get stirred up, grief can get stirred up, questions around gender identity can get pushed to the fore or stressed in a new way. Of course, finances, there's price tags attached to so many of these decisions, which can become really stressful in terms of how much money you have, or is money being given to you, and what does that mean? Are there strings attached? There's no way I could name all of it, but I will just give you one example of how one thing leads to another and how they can be brought forward. When I was planning a ceremony with a couple, the groom's father was recently deceased. And from the very first conversation with them, he expressed concern about if or how to memorialize his father that day, and especially in the ceremony. And at first, I didn't totally understand why he was so concerned about it, that it was something that was like actively stressing him out. Once we got into the discovery process, I could hear that on one hand, he really wanted to do right by his father and the memory of him. He looked up to him so much. He was so close to him. He wanted him to be there that day. He looked up to his father as a model for how to be a good husband. And there's so much feeling behind that. On the other hand, he's kind of a private person and not an especially emotive person. So the idea of doing a very emotional remembrance ritual in the ceremony in front of their whole community also didn't feel right. So that was the tension. One of the things we talked about was decoupling honoring his father's memory and that 30 minutes of the ceremony itself. So what I ended up suggesting was that he find a photograph of his dad on his wedding day, whether it's just a portrait of him or a portrait of his parents together, and having it reprinted, taking it to a frame shop, just spending some time and money to really turn it into a precious object and giving it a place of honor in his home. So that was something that specifically connected his dad to the wedding, and the fact that he looked up to him as a husband and was really honoring all of that. Secondly, something that came up was he mentioned that his dad had season tickets to a certain game for years, and he had many memories of going to games with his dad and with his brother, and his brother was now the one who possessed the season tickets. And I suggested making some time before the wedding to go to a game with his brother, and maybe just asking his brother, like, hey, what do you think Dad would say to me right now? If he were to give a toast on the wedding day, what do you think he would say? What do you think he would think of this moment in my life? And when I said that to him, he took it in. He said, yeah, and he said, and I think there's another conversation that I really want to have with my brother. And I don't know the nature of that conversation, but I know that he ended up making time for it. And that's exactly the kind of thing that it's really easy to not make time for, to not even know you need to make time for when you're engaged, because the wedding planning can take over your life. But by taking a little time to bring these things forward, it can really heal and move things in our family in a really beautiful way. And I just want to tag on for you what was decided about the ceremony and remembering his dad. He also had a conversation with his mom, asking her opinion and being sensitive to the fact that it was going to be a hard moment for her. And like many moms, she ultimately said, it's up to you, it's your day. In the ceremony itself, we ended up not making any mention of his dad specifically. We had a moment of remembrance for all those who couldn't be there that day, who belonged there. And even without naming his dad, of course, that is a person that many people were bringing into their hearts in that moment. And it was still very beautiful and moving, and it was plenty. without making a bigger show than felt comfortable for him. And they did a remembrance bookshelf. Maybe you've heard of a remembrance table where you have photographs of the deceased, and you can maybe just say, so people know, in memory of, or in our hearts today. And in their case, they actually had like a bookshelf because they had like this really neat lounge area at their reception, so it felt very homey. And it was also a chance to put photographs of other people. So for people who knew them, people flocked to those photographs, and really it makes them tell stories, and it's really beautiful. And then for people who didn't know them, they get to hear the stories, so it really does bring them present in a special way. And I'll share another way that you can approach that also is to put people's names in the program. If you don't want to name them in the ceremony, in the program it's typical to name the families and name the wedding party, stuff like that. And you can also say in our hearts today or in memory of, and that is another way to honor people.